Greetings. Happy holidays, right? Or should we say happy winter solstice, right? Whatever holiday you celebrate, right? Here we have our little Christmas tree. I could pass this up for $2. It was so cute. I actually bought a few of them and gave them away to people. Sometimes it's the simplest things that people appreciate the most. It's the gift that keeps on giving, especially when it only costs $2. Or does that make me cheap? I think it makes me cheap. Or does it make me poor? Could be a combination of both of those, actually. A lot of things are pretty much uncommunicable. A realization that is kind of blatantly obvious, and it's always the obvious stuff that people don't have a realization of, kind of like the nose in front of their face, is, for example, the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs that everybody loves to stare at, and they'll ponder endlessly about the Sphinx and the great pyramids and their purpose and how they were built. And yet, of course, there are hieroglyphs everywhere. Yet nobody, and I know there's probably a couple people out there that made that statement, and it's demonstrably true, that that was not the lingua franca of, the laity out there walking the grounds and, people baking bread and your average Joe Blow of ancient Egypt. That specifically is priestly class metaphysical symbolism, and you actually had to have, the clavis or the key, kind of like, that little thing in the corner of a map, not that anybody reads maps anymore, it was called a legend. Yeah, you had to have the paraphrasable chords, like, oh, that little blue squiggly line, that means a river, and the crosshatches, that means railroad track. I mean, you had to know what these things were, and then, of course, you didn't read them like conventional script, like we read things today, whether it be Russian or English. You actually had to have insight into what these things made implication to. So a lot of things are uncommunicable. I'll sit here endlessly, hopefully not endlessly, and flap my lips about things that are just so incredibly beautiful and simple and divine. And my motto is, I think I created it, simplicity is divinity. Someone might have said it before me, but not that I've heard it from anybody. But it is. I mean, Mother Nature must follow Occam's razor in the absolute sense. It must be incredibly simple. We have all these ideas that, there's this over here and that over there. And every so-called scientist today, and who's actually not a scientist, but they are mathematicians, they think that Mother Nature has all sorts of different stuff. Let's just make it really simple so that a child can understand it. Different things, we got electricity over here, and we got magnetism over there, and somewhere over here we got gravity. Yeah, and here we have the golden ratio, and all of this is, of course, ludicrous. If we talk about modern scientists, who of course is a mathematician, well, let's bring up a little piece of arithmetic, call it math if you like. Phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. Everything that we see in nature that is beautiful is harmonious, multiplicative representation of the one. That's no different than saying, not that this rock is, the most beautiful and most simple of things, which of course cannot be phenomena, which of course this rock is. The most beautiful things that we see in nature that people say, golden ratio, golden ratio. It's like, you love to throw around the word golden ratio, but do you know what that actually means? No, I know, it's just like beauty and harmony in nature. Okay, well, we know it's beautiful. We know it's harmonious because it actually flows with least resistance. It's the things that actually follow the currents of natural order, or prakriti, by the way. The ancient word dhamma, this means prakriti. People have spent nearly 1,000 years trying to translate the word dhamma, which is completely impossible. And there are Greek words like that are untranslatable, like oesia, nous, euristos, dias, tolma, nanke. These things are untranslatable, but we could really call them what they are and just say it's natural order. Natural order is what? Pressure mediation. Mother Nature is so simple. I've kind of humorously said that she's a hippie dreadlock chick with a hemp skirt and muddy feet, and of course I'm not actually giving representation to an actual persona, an entity, Mother Nature, and just using the roundabout term to natura naturans, or nature, then it must be ultimately extremely simple and very, very, even though people can't see it, incredibly simplex. We have all these things that people love to talk about, especially the white lighters. The white lighters love to talk about harmony. They love to talk about the golden ratio. They love to talk about vortexes. They love to talk about all these different things, and all of this is mere concept reification. True understanding is nonverbal. It is transcendental to mental cogitation, mentation, thought process. Well, we have electricity over here, gravity over here, magnetism over here, and that's completely ridiculous. This concept reification, occludes and obscures the simplicity of vision to see things as they naturally and truly are. Ice, water, and steam are obviously different words and concepts given to one thing, water, right? Except expressed under different temperature and pressure modalities, obviously so. Mother Nature does not have electricity, dielectricity, magnetism, gravity. These are not different things, nor is ice, water, and steam different things. Mother Nature has no idea what silly human beings are even talking about, not that Mother Nature actually exists as a sentient being. It's completely impossible. It's antithetical to natural law and natural order. Natural order, necessitatively, must follow that which is most simple and most divine, and all of these things must ultimately be connected at one foundation. And of course they are. But people can't see it, and mere words are just more concepts, but that's the means of communications that human beings have. We have sign language and we have symbolism. Symbolism is a different kind of language. There's a transcendental language of metaphysics. All ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, once again, was not the language of the laity. Your average bread maker, wagon wheel maker, it was not. You had to have an insight into the clavis. You had to understand the paraphrasable core of what was being talked about. This is the reason also, too, why all ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic translations are nonsensical. Have you ever read any English translation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead? You can kind of follow what it says. So superficially, it's followable, but it's incredibly inaccurate. It doesn't give true expression to what's being said. This is metaphysical symbolism, these hieroglyphs. We have concepts for things that do not exist. Human beings love to divide and conquer. And we love to divide and conquer and sublate nature into different categories. Electricity's here, gravity's over here. And every scientist on Earth that I know of, and they're not actual scientists, they say, one of these days in the future we're going to have a grand unified theory. It's like, well, from Mother Nature's perspective, it's already unified as human beings lack vision and understanding and clarity of vision, specifically wisdom, to see how connected everything ultimately is. Gravity does not exist. The phenomena, of course, of gravity does exist, but it's non-point source mutual mass acceleration. Magnetic attraction absolutely does not exist. Magnetism, by definition, is the three-dimensional force vector of centrifugal divergence, the creation of the toroidal vector of force and motion, which is, after effect, is the creation of space. Space is not a thing. Space has no property. It's a concept. It's a negative image of eternity or of infinity, or specifically inertia, i.e. the ether, i.e. of counterspatial zero-point energy, subspace energy, ether, zero-point energy. Who cares? Mother Nature certainly doesn't care, and I certainly couldn't care less. All the concepts that human beings give to reify one and the same thing. Once again, there's only ever been two foundations postulated for ultimate reality. One's been on impossible atomism, or as I call it, the cult of bumping particles, like Mother Nature's a crazy chick with a bag of magic particles. We've been brainwashed with this filth from Star Trek and every science fiction movie talking about tachyons and gluons, and completely ridiculous. There's only one fundamental particle, and the fundamental particle, is nothing other than super high energy light, or as I've humorously called it, hard light. We see this ultra high energy light being spit out from geomagnetic precessional black holes in the center of galaxies, spitting out trillions and trillions and trillions of tons of hydrogen. Hydrogen is nothing other than a little gyroscopic vortex. Every atom measured in picometers is nothing other than an electrostatic dynamo. All atoms are necessitatively compounds of hydrogen, which of course is undeniable, and I don't know of a single scientist that doesn't disagree with that fact, yet I've never heard a single one of them say that. It's like, let's be really simple here. Nature has to be simple, yeah? So all atoms, whether it be gold, silver, mercury, oxygen, nitrogen, anything and everything, is just a compounded version of hydrogen. Only one fundamental particle. If all free neutrons become protons outside of their nucleus, which every scientist agrees to, and I'm in full agreement with them, then that means there's only one fundamental particle. Every major expert in field theory says there's no such thing as an electron particle. Electron is a concept. Specifically, the phenomena, however, is one unit of dielectric induction, as said by J.J. Thomson. Tesla said that there's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. The phenomena, of course, is undeniable. There's no such thing as an electron particle. There's no such thing as a photon either. I've explained what a photon is. It is conceptual misappropriation by atomists, by materialists. This is the coaxial nature of light and the rarefaction compression along the dielectric perturbation that is the coaxial circuit of light. Human beings love to talk about vortexes. Here's an apple, which you could kind of see as a toroid. It's kind of an oblate toroid. This, of course, is not a real apple, but what's a vortex? Human beings, especially the white lighters, they love to talk about a vortex. It's like, well, what is a vortex? You know, a vortex is not anything different than magnetism, dielectricity, and gravity and electricity are different things. A vortex is this. You're looking at one half of the torus of the three-dimensional force vector of magnetism. Except the negative image of that, where actually something is spiraling in, we're actually looking at half of the hyperboloid. A hyperboloid is a negative image of a torus. Yeah? There's only two conjugate field geometries of the entire universe, the torus and the hyperboloid. Torus, of course, is a donut shape. Hyperboloid is an hourglass shape. You ever seen one of those sand hourglasses that you turn upside down, the sand pours from one side to the other? Negative image of a hyperboloid is a torus. Negative image of a torus is a hyperboloid. The superimposition of both, of course, is spherical. So what is a vortex? A vortex is one half of the hyperboloid. Take that hourglass-shaped object and cut it in half visually in your mind, and you're looking at a vortex. You see the little sand. Of course, the sand doesn't spiral in the glass, but if there are a few grains of sand, it would spiral around the inside of the half of the hyperboloid towards the plane of inertia, because everything is pressure mediation. So when human beings are so fascinated, especially the white lighters, love talking about a vortex. It's like, what's a vortex? A vortex is just half of the torus. Because you're looking at a vortex right there, right? Well, of course you are. So, if you understand the conjugate nature of the universe, you understand about 40%, and truly understand it, 40% of the universe, i.e. of natura naturans, or of Mother Nature. There is only this conjugate geometry. Everything is pressure, mediation, force and motion, inertia, and acceleration. Everything also, too, is modulation and embodiment. When there is modulation, there is entrapment. Modulation, of course, is primordial to the absolute. The Greeks called this the euristos dios. They called it dolma, and also too called it ananke. Interestingly enough, and it's not interesting to me, it's undeniable and necessitatively so, these words are really untranslatable. Ananke is translated as necessity, but what it really means is it can't exist any other way. Think in terms of light and illumination. Are these two different things? Just think about it a second. Light and illumination. Illumination is not something different than light. The nature of what the good is also, too, the attribute of the good. There's nothing in this universe, real or unreal, imaginary or otherwise, that doesn't have at least one attribute. The nature of the good is, of course, to do good. The nature of light is illumination. These are not two different things. They're principle and attribute. Yeah? Principle and attribute. There is no prima causa or original sin or first cause. This idea is exclusive to Judeo-Christianity. Not totally exclusive, actually. It's found within Gnosticism and some other things, too. So mostly exclusive, too. So people go looking for a first cause or original sin. The whole Adam and Eve allegory and, the apple and the snake and the Garden of Eden and all that other, hyperbolic stuff, which of course is completely implausible. Original sin. Okay, well, what people believe in is no concern of mine. It is, of course, someone who's evil who wants to convince others of things, and well, what do you care? Wisdom is its own reward. Nobody that actually has a jot of wisdom cares what anybody else thinks about anything, much less, pressure them to believe things, which is, of course, actually evil. The ancient principle within the Nikayas, by the way, is an ancient one that's found in the Vedas. Buddhists, for example, and I'm not going after Buddhists, however, there's a lot to go after them about, is they think that Buddhism is something totally new. The Four Noble Truths, as they like to think, is original. It's not. It's found within the Vedas. It's an ancient principle. And I've actually written an article about this and accurately translated the Four Noble Truths. What they actually mean is suffering. The identification of suffering. Like, there's some guy retching and, throwing up. Identification of suffering. Yeah. Number 2 is identification of the disease. Look at this person is suffering. What's the cause? Is it like drunk bad water? He's infected with, some sort of bad thing. So suffering, number 1, disease, number 2. Number 3, diagnosis. Yeah. What we need to do is this. And number 4 is application of the cure. So the Four Noble Truths is not original to Buddhism at all. There's nothing actually. Anybody that has actually truly studied it, and I've studied it in the original Pali, ancient dead language now, it's been dead for thousands of years, there's nothing new within it. Every major expert in both Sanskrit and Pali has said the same thing. There's nothing original in Buddhism. It's just rehashed. There's nothing new under the sun. So it's suffering, disease, diagnosis, and cure. Everything in nature, natura naturans, is so divinely simple. Even in photography, I made a lot of videos of camera reviews, and of course, ultimately it's about the image. A great image doesn't even have to be sharp. The most powerful images ever taken in the world are fuzzy images. It's about what moves somebody. And people are moved, it either pulls them in or it pushes them away, or it stops them. Everything is about fields and modulation. When there is modulation, there's agitation, right? It's kind of like when you agitate the waters, you can't see the bottom because everything's agitated. It's murky. Nothing is seen. You're lost. And this, of course, is the case. This is the reason why the ancient passage, Bhava Nirodha Nibbānam, the subjugation of becoming means nirvana. Becoming meaning what? Becoming meaning modulation, false identity. This identification phenomenology of seeing yourself as that which you are not. I see myself as the psychophysical being in the mirror when I brush my teeth. That's who I am. Like, no. The most repeated passage in ancient Pali, by the way, is Yisokaya, Namesata. The body is not my soul. My soul, of course, is incorrect because my soul implies one thing has another, is not the soul. Or the Mahapurisha, or the great person. Not literally the person as in persona, but as it meant spirit would be more accurate, a spiritus sancta. Modulation is embodiment. Even in the Sanskrit, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, the goal of yoga or the process of yoga is the subjugation of nirodha, the mind or the spirit or the nous, chitta, perturbations, vritti. Yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, the subjugation of noetic perturbations. In other words, the elimination of modulation. Modulation is disturbance. When there's modulation, it can be tuned. And when it can be tuned, it can be made manifest. Yeah? Everything is a signal. Yeah? You can't tune or capture a signal if it doesn't have modulation. Everything that you receive through your computer, internet, Wi-Fi, whether it be binary or otherwise, we're talking about an analog, because there's no such thing as a binary transmission. Binary is the modulation within the signal that is modulated. Everything that comes through your computer, whether it be through Wi-Fi or the coax cable that feeds your internet, also to your satellite TV, even your non-satellite TV, it's a modulation. Binary is a type of image capture. There's no such thing as binary signals. Nobody sees or experiences anything. It's a storage medium and a transmission type medium, but still the signal, of course, itself is amplitude modulation. It could be either upper sideband or lower sideband, but nobody has ever heard digital music or seen digital images. Light is not digital, light is analog. All sound, even if it comes from a digital CD, which is basically everything today, an MP3 player, whatever. Nobody has ever heard digital music or digital pictures or video or anything. Well, this is a digital image. It's captured digitally. It's stored in MP4 format. Yeah, but what's created on the screen, of course, is light. No human being has ever seen or heard digital anything. Human beings don't have the ability to see a digital signal. Natura naturans, or nature, is incredibly simple. Even hate and love is easily explained. If you actually understand the clavis or the key, it's kind of like the Rosetta Stone, right? You understand the clavis and the key, everything becomes divinely simple. Why is hate bad and why is love good? I don't know of a single movie that's accurately explained it. You can explain it in about 10 seconds. Hate is exactly like this fire. It constantly has to be fed. It requires force and motion. Love is as simple as falling. It requires not only no energy, it is self-energizing. It is a cooling. This requires energy, force. It requires a lot. Nobody can keep this up forever. Some people keep it up for decades. You know, hate, animosity. When I say hate will burn you up, well, that's exactly what it does. See, there within 20 seconds I explain hate and love through simple metaphysics. They're not different fields either. Magnetism is the dielectric field. Gravity is non-point source mutual mass acceleration. The same thing when you stick your hand in a box of styrofoam beads, where you pull your hand out and the little styrofoam beads are stuck to your hand. It's an electrostatic thing. That's the same thing gravity is. Yeah. Magnetic attraction is no different than dielectric acceleration. The only distinction is, of course, it's point source. Magnetic attraction cannot exist because that attraction is actually acceleration towards counter space, the erasure of space. Erasure of space, of course, is the negative image of eternity, i.e. infinity, i.e. of inertia, i.e. of the ether. So, so-called magnetic attraction is nothing other than point source dielectric acceleration. So-called gravity is non-point source mutual mass acceleration towards a null pressure point in counter space. No two objects are ever accelerating towards one another. This is visible underneath the ferrocell in so-called magnetic attraction, which does not exist. They're actually accelerating towards a null pressure point in counter space. Same thing with bodies out there in space. But space is not a receptacle. No field terminal ever terminated in space because space is not a thing. Space is the absence of a thing. It's a negative image of eternity. Space has no properties. You can't bend it, twist it, or warp it, contrary to all the science fiction movies that we grew up watching. So Mother Nature, if you actually understand the key and the clavis, you can understand all fields, you can understand hate and love, you can understand what embodiment is, and also, too, what transcendence is. Well, if embodiment is due to primordial agnosis, and primordial agnosis is no different than saying illumination, with respect to light, then how for then what is this thing called retroduction or apophaticism, i.e. the via negativa path of disobjectification? Wisdom is nothing different than the self, and I mean self with a capital S. Well, what is wisdom? Doesn't wisdom lead to extraction? Well, obviously it does. So what would extraction be? We know what embodiment is since we've been talking about it. What therefore then necessitatively, logically, must thence be liberation and the methodology of apophaticism. What is disobjectification? Well, you can't think your way out of a thinking box. So how do you remove primordial agnosis? What's the opposite of agnosis? Isn't the opposite of agnosis wisdom? Agnosis is disbursement. Therefore, too, wouldn't wisdom or gnosis be concentration, right? Concentration would be extraction from one thing in identification or embodiment with another, right? What's the opposite of dilution? Yeah, because agnosis leads to dilution, right? So what's the opposite of dilution? And how would you go about the opposite of dilution? Extraction, concentration. Okay, that's a good one. Extraction, concentration. What's the hyperlogical methodology for extraction and the opposite of dilution? It's really simple, actually. But it's not simplex, and it is definitely not simplex to explain. Isn't there the rub? Everything is reducibly simple. Mother Nature must necessitatively follow a divine mirror image of what we refer to generally as Occam's razor. Mother Nature is so simple. Human beings, however, are so ignorant. Can't see the forest for the trees. All the fields are already one, and everything is explainable simply and divinely. But people have to have that clavis and that key, that primer, that paraphrasable core into their mind of understanding the operation of things. You can understand human beings, you can understand love and hate, you can understand all field modalities, you can understand what embodiment is. You then know, and it's just an old doctor, a Vedic doctor's motto, and it's the case of the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, what's the disease that's causing the suffering? What's the diagnosis? And the application of the cure. Suffering is due to primordial agnosis. Yeah, this is the disease that people are suffering from, and they don't know it. And we've diagnosed it, and now we're going to apply the cure. What's the cure? Well, the cure is apophatism, theurgy, negative dialectic. You have many different words for one and the same thing. Divine simplicity. People talk about the golden ratio and vortexes. Well, golden ratio is just multiplicative manifestation of the one. Because 5 is to 1 is 1 is to 5. 5, of course, is the golden ratio. So when we're looking at something that's beautiful, what we're looking at is a multiplicative of the one that sits in harmony and simplicity with Mother Nature. A vortex is just half of a torus. That's all we're looking at. We're looking at the negative image of the torus, or half of the hyperboloid, the centripetal inertia and acceleration towards rest, which is no different than what love is. Hate would be equivalent to magnetism, and love would be equivalent to dielectricity, the acceleration towards counterspace. It's not more difficult than that. Human beings can't see what is really simple. And you could sit here flapping your lips, meaning me, endlessly. But unless people realize it for themselves, listening to the words is not going to help anybody. I never claimed that it did or it would. Anyway, happy holidays, and catch you later.